All right. Welcome back. How you doing, Ken? What's up?
I am good. How about yourself?
I like this part where I pretend I'm not coming on the show and then I show up like randomly.
Yeah, it's like I just prep for everything, and I'm like, all right, I got this. I got everything scanned, done. I have my mic is working, my audio is good. I have the script, I have the deck, I have everything coordinated with Joe, and all of a sudden you decide, hey, why don't we just move the show up early in an hour? I'm like,
Ken, if
really?
you're going to be a startup person, you got to be used to adversity. All right. So
look, this agile development, but this is not a thing for shows. Okay, you got to stop doing that.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We're a little bit early today because I have to jump into an interview shortly after this, but I appreciate my friends for joining us early. But welcome back to the Created Economy. This is our weekly interview series where we chat with leaders and voices from the created economy itself. And we talk about what's going on in the industry at large. We do go live on Wednesdays, usually at 2 p.m. Pacific, but today at 1. You can find out more over at created.show. It's the official show page for the created economy. If you also are interested in long form content, though, head over to createdeconomy.com. It's a good place to pick up some of the potentially longer form thoughts, but we don't tend to have a lot of those, so we don't put a lot there. But we do put all of the links from the news on Friday up there, so that's probably another good reason to head there. Just in case you don't follow us already, we do encourage you to give us a follow over at Created Economy. Almost anywhere you can find places to follow people, that's who we are. We are there that way. And in case you didn't know, by the way, we do have 3 shows a week. On Tuesdays, we do like sort of our office hours working sessions at 10 a.m. Pacific, where over the last few weeks, we've been looking at how to integrate Web3 tools into your Web2 business. We have our interview series today on Wednesdays, The Created Economy. And of course, on Friday mornings, you can catch Created Briefs, which is our news show. All righty. Oh, by the way, we are doing, before we jump into our combo with Joe, we are doing an AMA giveaway, of course. As usual, AMA is the official coin of the show. You can grab some free money. If you like free money, head over to the link that you see here. It's also at bit.ly/AMA-drop-19. So scan or enter. I think we have the Slack, but nobody, I don't know. I haven't seen too many people joining the Slack, so I'm just going to take the slide out. It's just too much work to talk about it. But we are lucky and fortunate today to have our old friend, Joe Fernandez, formerly of Klout and Joy Mode, joining us today. And let's just jump right into it because, everybody knows who Joe is. There's all these people where are you waiting to see Joe? They don't want to see our deck. Joe, what's up, man?
This is awesome. I didn't know this was so professional. This is amazing.
We do our best to sound professional.
It's only an appearance, but in actuality, as you know, that's never the case.
I know the real Greg and Ken, so I'm shocked right now.
There's a setting on the microphone to make us sound like that, So, Joe, before we dive in, it's funny, we've had so many guests. This is like what episode is this? Like our 40th 32 of this show alone.
Yeah.
And I've had rarely so many people be like, I'm really looking forward to that as the one where like Joe's going to be on. So, but for the folks who don't know, can you just give a quick background? Who are you? What's up? And if you want to chat about what you're working on now, feel free.
Sure. Yeah. Excited to be here. Pardon me. So I guess I'm most known for founding Klout, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. Greg was very much there in those early days. Klout is now very dated because we got acquired in 2014. But the early wave of social, we were really the way people understood influence, and thinking about creators now, like. That was kind of the early days of this creator economy. Our business kind of had a couple different avenues for growth and monetization. We were very consumer centric, but we had a data business where billions of API calls a day for people using our data. Partners like Microsoft and Salesforce, and kind of every big company using our data. And then we had a product called Klout Perks that we worked with. All the big brands to put their products in the hands of influencers. Were acquired in 2014. I then went on to found a company called Joy Mode, totally different real world logistics. Like the idea there was like Netflix for stuff. So it was everything you shouldn't or don't need to own, we owned, and we would deliver it to you when you need it and come and get it when you did it. You know, unsurprisingly, a very challenging business when you think about all that entails. And that got acquired in 2020, and I'm now early days of something new, more in the Klout realm of kind of identity and you know, kind of professional profile and things like that.
So, Joe, like when you look at Klaout, the history of Klaout, right? And it was in a time when there was Web 2, social media stuff where people were posting reviews on like Yelp or using things like Foursquare, location-based check-ins, and traditional social media. What was the when you created Klout back then, how did that change? How do you think that would have changed in today's age, right? Like what was it about that era that we're like, "Oh, this is something, let's see if we can quantify the data from people's social posts, their online platforms and see how influential they are."
Yeah, it was this kind of amazing moment in 2008 when I started the company. I'd actually had jaw surgery, and my jaw was wired shut for like 3 months. Like I literally couldn't talk. And during that time, it was early 2008, I basically completely relied on social media, Twitter and Facebook, to communicate. And it hit me that for the first time, word of mouth was scalable. And the data was there to actually understand it, to like measure it. So I was stuck in my apartment in New York. My background was engineering. I got really obsessed with this idea. I was also on a lot of drugs from the jaw surgery, but I
Legal
built
drugs, folks. Come on.
yeah, I built the first prototype of Klout while I was wired shut, and it was this bet that every person was going to be a broadcaster, and you know the people who trusted me the most could hear instantly my opinion on anything, and same the people I trusted the most. Um, so that has only increased, and you know we have seen the world change where you know people, it's not about pages, it's not about like newyorktimes.com, it's about people and kind of their reach and distribution, and any person with a phone can basically build an audience, and there's people in that audience that trust them, and you know there's obviously different levels of reach, but like every person is influential to somebody.
Mm.
And Klout really strive to understand that. You know, fast forward to today, and it's harder in most ways. Mostly harder. You know, there's a lot more noise. Um, a lot more noise, and it's also a lot harder to get access to the data. Back then, you know, there was this movement of like open data. Twitter was open, Facebook was open. Like everyone was relatively open, and it created the ability to get access to the data. That eventually changed, and you know, for the last 5 or so years, it's been really hard to get access to any data. What's interesting with what's happening in Web3 is it's kind of swinging back the other way, where data now, you know, the blockchain is a public thing. And so if I were thinking about what a more modern version of Klout would look like, you know, you would certainly be looking at what's written to the blockchain.
Can you, I mean, because the essence of Web3 and blockchain is very decentralized, right? It gives the creators or some a person the opportunity to own their data. Would it be possible, or would it be more difficult to revive Clout in this day and age for to account for that type of influence? Like, would you, if you were to build Clout again, right? How would it be possible to incorporate, someone's interactions on like services like Discord, on Patreon, with when it comes to like NFTs or crypto or anything like that? Would it be, or would it just be a lot more, heavy lifting, or would it be near impossible to do?
Really, really difficult. Again, because most of the services, Discord, Patreon, like are more Web 2 in the sense that like you know their data is owned and kind of you know there's a wall around it. Um, NFTs are different because that is something that's on the blockchain and you could query against. There's a real challenge around identity of like mapping whether it's a Twitter handle or an email or whatever, to a wallet, and lots of stuff happening there. You have to imagine that's going to evolve. And um, so it'll be interesting to see like what, if they're, because I get asked this question, like, Klout got acquired in 2014. The people who acquired it, kind of leveraged the technology in their own tools, but dropped the ball on the consumer opportunity. Like, why hasn't there been a service like this in the last, 8 years now? And it has been because of access to data. And that seems like it is changing. I don't know that it'll change enough to fully open the door the way it was, in 2010.
Our old friend Jody still is running, and it's like an all crypto thing now. So
Yeah, whatever the hot thing is. So
so Joe, I think you touch on an important part. I guess like I was saying this yesterday or in the show Tuesday, that you remember Orin and Rapleaf, right? Like, I think there's going to be a Rapleaf of wallets at some point, right? Like someone's going to go mine all that shit and figure out like who you are, even if you don't want to be figured out and whatnot, right? And there's going to be interesting things that happen here. But I want to go back to a little bit to the early days of Klout, just because I feel like there's sort of this sort of thing that's happened. It used to be, remember, I'm sure you experienced this just as much as I have, way more than I have, I bet. But when I tell people I used to work at Klout, they're like, oh, like you either get like, oh, awesome, or like, fuck you. Right? Like,
yeah, it's funny for sure.
And then I feel like that is sort of like how people now feel about influencers as well. And by the way, and also now even about like crypto, right? Like, what's the underlying thing? Like, what's the thread, I guess, in your mind? Like, what's going on there, right? Like, why do people have like these kind of like utteral, like sort of like reactions to this stuff?
I mean, most people, and this is hard, I really struggle to recognize this because as an entrepreneur, we're all about change and like, how do we change the world? Most people hate change.
Yeah.
And if they could, they'd wind the clocks back to, whatever, 1997 or something. Mm-hmm. So anything, and Klout was a bet on change. It was a bet that, again, the world was going to, like, the way information was distributed was going to change, and the way an identity was going to change, and the kind of, birth of influencers, at scale. And so, same with crypto and NFTs, like all these things are kind of huge changes in where the world's going. And a lot of people are like, I don't want the world to go that way. Mm-hmm. Not because they actually understand what it means, but just that it's a change. And, Klout, it was definitely like a lightning rod, and that made it a lot of fun to build. But, I would get like death threats, and people would, it'd always be like major drama. Now it's funny, if I happen to wear a Klout shirt, I will almost always get stopped. And like literally people have offered me money to like buy the shirts and stuff.
Oh, I got a whole pile of them upstairs.
Like, yeah.
That reminded me. I should have gotten the Klout shirts that I have. I have the ones that that from South.
I still got my Klout Law shirt somewhere.
Yeah. They're big money. That's your worth more than NFTs. No. But I think it's been long enough that people are like, oh wow, that was really interesting, and mostly positive by this point, but there was definitely massive drama.
Do you find that Klout, like, I guess this is a common theme in a lot of early technologies that kind of went away through some sort of an exit, whether they were shuttered or got acquired. Do you think that Klout was one of those, it was too early of a company? Like, obviously back when you started it in the early 2000s, or 2010s, to when it got sold, like, as Greg pointed out, there was like that guttural reaction, like, oh my God, like, yay, I have a higher score than Justin Bieber or Barack Obama, or, it's like I had a high score. It was that most people kind of equated it to a vanity metric. But now you look at it today, do you think that Klout would have been more of a success in today's age?
Yeah, I mean, the world definitely needs a Klout-like service today. Like, you know, to understand the value that these influencers have, or, you know, because, you know, there's a lot of faking of stuff.
Yeah.
uh, so there's like that angle, but there's also just like making sense of the information around us. Like Klout was a way to understand like who's saying what online and how much, you know, authority or reputation or trust you should have in them. Uh, and with, you know, disinformation and all the things we've seen over the last, you know, 5 or 6 years, especially, like a Klout-like service would be really valuable. Like, you know, it should be a foundational layer of what the internet is today.
Yeah.
So we were definitely too early. And there was definitely things like from an execution standpoint that, you know, hurt us, that didn't put us in a position to like ride that wave as far as we should have.
So I want to add, I guess I want to step into the identity part a little bit. I know that's an area you're spending a lot more time on now. Identity's gotten a lot more complex, right? Like I think when we started, you know, when back in the Klout days, it was like OAuth was like just becoming a thing, really, right? Like, you know, and like people were centralizing identity back then, right? And now we're moving towards like decentralizing identity. And I think it creates these challenges you're talking about, right? Like, which is like, you know, I got screwed today, like on Discord, like, and lost some money, like, cause I like wasn't paying attention and I didn't know who I was chatting with, right? Like kind of thing, right? What are your thoughts, I guess, Joe? Now, I guess you're starting to like spend more time putting your mind around it, right? Like, what's the future of identity, I guess, from your point of view, or like, and I guess like, what are the new factors or forces maybe that we overlooked, or maybe that we took for granted, like as we start to like think about the future of like how we represent ourselves online and ultimately how we then interact on top of that?
Yeah, I mean, that 2008, 2010 era was like, yeah, everyone waking up that like, oh wow, I need to have, you know, an online personal brand, and it's going to help me in my social life, in my career, all these things. Then it was like, oh crap, like I don't want everything I do online part of that brand. So now I want to decentralize it and fragment it and, you know, anonymize it in different ways. And, you know, Google had their circles, which was like an interesting, like, you know, I think right thought, wrong implementation.
Wrong
Um,
time, probably too, right?
um, yeah, to where we are now, where in some ways it's better now because like we went through that backlash of like, oh crap, somebody found a picture of me from college doing something stupid on my Instagram account, and now I'm like black, you know, I can't get a job I want. Where now people are mostly over that because everyone has stuff online they're not proud of, but there is, you know, that's still a fear. Um, you have a lot of people trying to like narrow down and, you know, like want to be less findable, which is a challenge from, you know, like thinking of as a product builder, that is a challenge. Um, it's, I don't know, it's definitely fluid. So that I think it is hard to get like, I wouldn't say I have my head fully around it, even though it's like only thing I think about.
It's a huge topic because I think, you know, to your point, there's a spectrum now of like how we want to represent ourselves, and there isn't a toolkit yet for like sort of like, it's certainly not a universal toolkit, right? Like, so I think where the bigger challenge is actually less identity. Like, I feel like there are identifiers, right, that you can use for commonality, but I think reputation is sort of the area that has like the number one sort of more interesting challenges in it, right? Because like, how do you know, like, how do you build reputation if you're never like the same person twice, right? Or something like that, right? And then, you know, and I think like a lot of the generational stuff that maybe it's like, you know, I'm old. I mean, you guys are somewhat old, right? But you know, it's like, maybe like I still think that way because I still try to think about, like, I still understand the world from a point of view of like reputation more so than like, I don't know, maybe there's a different currency, you know, when you move to this more anonymized state. You know, I don't know what it would be yet, but maybe there's something different going on.
Yeah, the reputation part is very much like what I'm working on. And, you know, trying to bring some of your offline reputation online,
Mhm.
around like relationships you might have in professional settings. Because whether it's a job or a DAO or you know whatever thing you're trying to accomplish, like
Mm.
you know that is a link, that is a component that like makes everything work much better.
Yeah.
But it's really
Yeah,
hard.
it could be like,
So
here's my portfolio of my investment, and like, fuck you. It doesn't matter what your face looks like. It doesn't matter if anyone likes you. You did well. Like, what I'm saying? Like, it feels like we may end up in some kind of version of this as well. Um,
I
you
think
know,
there's this like
it won't be one or the other, but I think like it's in this spectrum, right? Of like pure data driven things versus like human things.
yeah, there are things where there's like proof of work, whether
Mhm.
it's like, oh, here's my, Dribble or Behance like portfolio, and like
Yeah.
clearly I can design these screens, or here's my GitHub and clearly I can code that thing, whatever you need built, or here's my portfolio and I'm in deals, or I'm buying the right NFTs or whatever it is. And but that kind of is nice, for, especially as technologists, like we and capitalists,
Yeah.
we like to think about like it's the most efficient way to operate,
Mhm.
but you still interpersonally interact in most cases.
Yeah.
Like, is this somebody I want to work with? Is this somebody I can trust?
Mhm.
Is this somebody who gets results in a way that aligns with my values?
Yeah.
So Joe, can you tell us a little bit more? Like you started off, you told us about Klout, you told us about what you did at Joy Mode. What are you working on now? And Greg, I imagine alluded to it a little bit in terms of
I'm not
yeah.
telling.
Spill it, Greg. I've been trying to get it out of Greg. He won't tell me. So why would you share a little bit more about what you're up to, what your next project is now? Because I understand it's maybe tangentially related to the creator economy space. I'm kind of curious, like, what problems are you seeing in the world, and how are you using technology to solve them?
Yeah, and really early on this thing, so I'm not trying to be cagey on stealth, whatever. It's more that it's loose, and we're in kind of an exploration mode. But the thing I've been fascinated about is kind of going back to Klout. Like Klout was this moment where people were coming online and trying to put their identity, their social identity online, and us trying to make sense of that. Like the professional counterpart to that was something I was always really fascinated in. And how does the world know, like, not just our pedigree and like a resume structure of like, these schools, these companies, but like, our character, our ambitions, our achievements, our working style, whatever. And so thinking a lot about how to bring that to life. The resume is like a 500-year-old artifact. Like, and the very definition of Web 1.0, which is like, oh, take this thing and exist in the real world and digitize it. Like that's what LinkedIn is this kind of digital representation of a resume. So like, it's crazy to me when I think about social, consumer social, the creator economy, how many new formats have emerged and how each new format enables us, like explodes the ways we can communicate, and the like, and the ways we can understand each other, and the creativity and everything. But nothing has happened on the professional side. Like it's still a resume. Uh, so playing with formats to see if we can better show off who people are and what they're capable of beyond what boxes do they fit in.
And so this is not like a score. You're not giving someone a metric. You're kind of changing the way people are perceived professionally in terms of like what are their bona fides, like what kind of where did they go to school, what kind of career have they had, what kind of certifications they may have. It's as opposed to, oh, this guy, Greg did this great TikTok video, or he's viral for doing
Mhm.
shows around Web3, or his letters to his son, those type of things. It's a little bit more like, oh, Greg is a serial entrepreneur. He did X, Y, and Z. He went to NYU. um he got, thrown in jail for smuggling drugs across the border, those type of things, right? I mean, but it's like a look behind the curtain besides just, what do you see on a typical resume, as you were talking about? Like, resume is literally just this old artifact. But like, how does that differ? And I get that this is very early stages for you, but like, there's been a few attempts at redefining what that resume is, right? What is it about now that kind of is like, hey, this is a good time to kind of really rethink what a resume is?
Yeah. And I don't know that the resume actually goes away. Like, it's LinkedIn is very entrenched and the resume is very entrenched. Like, it's more in my mind, can we create additional surface area for people to express and understand each other? So like, the great example, you can see his resume, like, his companies, YC, startup, Klout, we got to work together there, like where he went to school, whatever. But you don't know that, like, for me and probably for a bunch of people, Greg's the first person I want to talk to when I'm ideating something in consumer. Like, he's just, a creative force. And that, like, me saying that and you hearing that and having that kind of captured in some way adds, so much dimension to the bullet points on the resume that you'll never see. So, it's more about surface area increasing than necessarily replacing, even though I would love for resumes to go away. And we will have an incredible challenge. Like, LinkedIn and the resume, they've both been around for a really long time and are super entrenched. And there's a massive cold start challenge in getting anyone to care about anything new. So, it's, from where we are now to that moment is like a lot of uphill climbing.
Interesting. You mentioned the codestar problem, actually. I guess, what are your thoughts then? I guess, which is the hard side, actually, right? Like, I actually have trouble with this sometimes, like when I try to like apply it, because so like, especially with like a two-sided thing or something that's like sort of consumed, is the hard side getting people to make these, or is the hard side getting people to trust these, right? Like, and sort of believe them.
Yeah, I struggle too. And I like convince myself.
They both seem hard. I don't know. Right?
They both seem hard. Like, yeah, will people create the content we are, hoping they will? And will that content be believable and worth consuming? Mm-hmm. Like, that's the question. And I think we look a little bit more like a social network than we do a marketplace. Like, we are not trying to build a like get hired service, right? Though jobs are, an eventual outcome. But I don't think of LinkedIn as a get hired. Like, you don't create a LinkedIn profile specifically for a job. You create a LinkedIn profile because you're like, well, in 6 months I might be out in market, so I should probably set up my profile so my name's out there. I should also probably get a shirt and a haircut. It's like part of the process, but it's not like, oh, I did this thing to apply for this specific job, which would be more of a marketplace.
It's like getting the receipts, right? Like, it's like what they always say, like, there's this expression about trees or about the environment, but I usually use it in networking. But like they say, the best time to plant a tree was like 25 years ago. The second best time is right now, right? Yeah. And it's a similar thing with networking and sort of like relationships, is that the best time to do it is as early as possible. Like, you can't build a network the day you need it. You build it over you
want to nurture it,
right? Yeah. And so to the extent that you've done that, it almost feels like you're offering like almost not a score, but like a visualization of like the peaks in that network, right? Like, because at least from my point of view, I guess presumably the people who would offer this kind of feedback or input tend to be people who truly value you, or may even over index in how much they value you, right? Like, versus like, like someone who worked on your team that was like 50 stacks away from you or something, probably, I don't know. Like, yeah, I heard about it. I saw his emails, but I don't know if he was I don't know him personally enough to like, to put my name on the line. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, giving context and credibility to the content,
Mhm.
and whether that takes the form of a score or how we visualize that, that's something we're definitely experimenting a lot with. Like the score kind of idea comes very natural to me, and like I fall back to it quickly. But there's also like, we think a lot about tokens and some of the
Mhm.
Web3, the design patterns that are emerging around that are really fascinating. And I think there'll be some really fun stuff we can play with there.
Well, I think, Greg, is what you're talking about in terms of like, and same thing with Joe is I agree. Like LinkedIn is never really it's not the place to go get hired. It's all about professional development, in my opinion, right? It's all like, hey, you go there, you create your Facebook page, the equivalent of a Facebook page is basically your resume, and everything goes off of that. It's the data feed that is the part that feeds everything in LinkedIn. You go to LinkedIn to brush up on your skills, to network with people, to showcase whatever you're doing in your professional life as a like, hey, I'm doing this podcast, or I'm doing uh I'm putting out this long diatribe of nonsense, but it's going to garner huge clicks, and I'm here to make sales, right? It's ultimately a sales thing. But as you're talking, Greg, kind of reminded me of, I don't know if it's necessarily like Indeed, but these TV commercials, right? Where it's like,
Mm.
oh, somebody's upset about their job, or like, oh, melancholy about their job. And they're like, they pick up their phone. It's like, oh, all of a sudden, bling, this notification on I think it was Indeed. It's like, hey, someone's hiring for blah blah blah, or you just landed this role. It's like, and it's like Indeed. Like I think the framing is like Indeed, a place where you get hired or something like that, right? And it's like Indeed or Career Builder or whatever that is focused on literally getting you your next job, as opposed to LinkedIn, which is more on the long game, the long game, right? But as you're talking, I kind of almost see what you're doing. Like my understanding is that what you're doing is it's like like a networking algorithm, right? Networking in terms of the actual people finding somebody, as opposed to from the more on the technical term, because it's like, yeah, I would like to be able to find somebody I can work with, or that to help me put together to design an NFT for me, right? But I don't know where to start. I don't want to, I can go on to Dribble or Behance and kind of vet them based on their artwork, but I don't know I need to know more about them in order to trust them for some working relationship or something like that. So your system could very well offer that in terms of showing me their influence, their bona fides, their CV, and saying, oh yeah, this person worked with Greg on blah blah blah, or had some involvement working on like Sony's new whatever. I'm like, oh well, that's kind of fascinating. That adds more credence to what they're doing, and I'd like to to work with them, to hire them for this role, as opposed to, because you're right. I think the resume is very flat. You kind of look at, it's like, oh, we're founder at Klout, engineer. Okay, cool. But let's put, Joe, why don't you come in for an interview? We're going to put you through this engineering test, right? It's like, wait, it's just very formulaic, as opposed to, how do I know you a little bit more? So, but I also see what you're doing, you know, as kind of pulling it back to what the show in terms of like the creator economy, how brands can find creators themselves, right? I think it's I think since there's like what 50 million creators out there right now, according to Signal Fire, it's like, how do you vet like, oh yeah, let's reach out to, and it's almost what I guess certainly you have a lot more experience. You have a lot of experience with it with Cloudworks. How did you figure out, hey, let's go reach out to Ken versus reaching out to Greg for this to be this influencer or this creator or something like that. Like, how can you walk us through that? Like, how can brands interact, better build relationships with creators, or identify those that they want to work with and relate, and how your system could potentially tie into that?
Yeah, I'm not sure yet how they'll fit in. I do think, I love the idea that everyone is a creator in some way. And kind of, helping bring that to life is exciting. I can talk about at Klout, that was from very early days, connecting brands with the right influencers was like, it's not just how we made money, but it was like it was a growth engine for us because it reinforced the value of the Klout score. Like the fact that Virgin America was giving away free plane flights, and Audi was giving people access to the new cars, like based on their Klout score, made the score real and made more people sign up. So, I've definitely seen the power of like those relationships.
So in terms of what advice would you or could you give to brands who are like, hey, let's figure out, they're running a campaign, right? And I think on the show we've talked about how creators make a lot of their money through these brand deals now. Like they can't go off and say, oh yeah, I'm going to go do this online academy or something like that. It's like, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. But how do brands evaluate their creators, or what advice would you give them? Because like you said, these brands approached you. It's like, hey, we identify these influencers, not to creators, but these influencers back when you're doing Clout Perks. But obviously, fast forward, was it like a decade later or 5, 6, I don't know, like almost a decade later,
Million
right?
years.
Yeah, a million years in startup terms. How has the game changed, and how can brands say, oh, yeah, no, let's not reach out to Ken because, but reach out to Greg because he's a lot more influential about Web3 versus Ken, who's maybe more influential about something else.
Unfortunately, there's way more tools now, and I don't live in this world anymore.
Mhm.
But I have not seen a tool that I have felt like, really up the game. There's a lot of tools that help you manage process and, kind of, do some basic tracking, but like that give you the insights to really know who the right person is up front. Yeah, I'm at least skeptical. I know been a lot of, there's a infinite kind of small companies to agencies that have worked on that. And there may be somebody who's doing an amazing job that I'm not aware of. Uh, one of the things that seems like it's changed, but that we were very, very like stringent on at Klout was like, we never would tell the influencers or the creators what to say. Our thing was like, if you put the right product in front of the right people, they will create the right content. And I see mixed results on that now. Like some brands look like they do very, it's like very cookie cutter on like, hey, here's what an engagement with us looks like. You put these, use these exact hashtags, these exact, kind of brand story. As a consumer, and back then as somebody building a company like this, I've always really liked, when they give the creators, the influencers, the room to tell the story in their language. And for us, that even literally meant no guarantee that this person will create content. Like we would put stuff in front of influencers in the form of these Klout perks. They could take them. There was never an explicit, like, you have to tweet 7 times or you have to create 3 Instagram pictures. It was a bet that we know these people create content about these topics. If we put them in the right scenario, they'll do it. And it seems like things have gotten a lot more like formulaic and cookie cutter. And maybe that's just how it has to be with scale. So I don't know if I answered the question, but that's how we used to think about it.
Okay, that's good.
I guess, Joe, I want to talk a little bit about Joy Mode as well. And folks think startups are just a pain in the ass and they're hard work, right? It doesn't matter how much we know, like we're probably wrong, right? Like it just feels like you're probably going to make more mistakes ever than anything else, right? But I am curious, you actually delved in, like Joy Mode dealt with like an interesting topic in today's sort of like creator economy even, which is sort of this idea of ownership, right? And and like shifting models about like how we think about what we want to own, like how we value convenience, how we value like participation, experiences, and these other pieces, right? It was like a wonderful experiment in bringing a bunch of these forces together, right? Today, actually, there's a lot of companies who are like, everyone should own everything, right? Like they actually want like all work to be sort of like a co-op between like the people doing it, like the people who started, with everyone who ever contributes to it, and these other things. I'm kind of curious, like, do you think like if you do, like, could you reinvent joy mode like in the Web3 realm, like, you know, in a way that you thought, like, now that you've learned sort of the things that worked well and the things that didn't work well, like, do you think there was a viable model like for joy mode, like kind of now that we have like these new economic models potentially in play, like to leverage?
I don't think so. So joy mode was a, you know, I actually had the idea for joy mode before the idea for Klout, and I had moved to New York City, met a girl who's now my wife, but when we moved in with each other, our apartment was so small that basically anything we bought, we had to get rid of something. And it was nice to, like, you know, not have clutter. But on the other side, I hated that, you know, what we did in our life was controlled by what we, you know, had space to own. And I didn't want to own camping gear and, you know, specialized cooking stuff and whatever. So joy mode was an idea of like, well, you don't have to own that. You can, you know, we as a company will own it and we'll bring it to you when you need it. The challenge wasn't the unit economics of the stuff. Like, it was, you know, we would, to give you a sense of the scale we were at, we had millions of items of inventory, and maybe not millions, hundreds of thousands of items of inventory. We would deliver on a normal week, only being here in LA, 50 to 60,000 products out across the city.
Wow.
And that stuff would come back, get cleaned, get tested, get prepared, and then go back out again. So pretty big scale. And in that, the challenge wasn't like acquiring the inventory where we need to, like, you know, tokenize everything and let people buy in and then like distribute funds out as stuff gets rented. You could do that. Like, it would probably be pretty cool. But the challenge, why we sold the company and why it's never went nationwide, though the people who bought it are doing some cool stuff, and it is still around. The mind shift of, hey, everyone talks about like, I don't want to own stuff. Everyone likes the idea of like, oh, I care about the environment. I want to do more things with my friends and family in the real world. But when it actually comes down to it, it's easier to sit on your couch and watch Netflix. And it's like climate change in general. And I'm guilty of this, where it's like, yeah, I care a lot about climate change. And if somebody's like, well, what are you doing about it? It's like, well, I guess I mostly recycle. You know, I think people really liked to, everyone I told about the idea would be like, oh my God, I love it. I can't wait to use it. And I'd be like, cool, you should use it this weekend. And it'd be like, well,
yeah,
this weekend I'm super busy. Like, definitely not. And then it'd be like, okay, well then when? They're like, next Super Bowl. You know, next Super Bowl, I'm going to throw a huge party. I'm going to use it. I'd be like, just do something small this week. And they're like, oh, I can't. I'm so busy.
Yeah.
People, it was really hard. The like activation of getting somebody to like kind of commit to doing something was the real challenge.
So the hard side here is easier to understand, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually like a really like messed with my mind as a founder, because
right.
I built a company in Klout where people would literally give me death threats of how much they hated it, but use it all the time. Right. Like, in fact, the people who talked the most shit about Klout used it the most.
Yeah.
Then I started a company called, you know, Joy Mode, where every person I met would say how much they loved it, but not use it.
Right.
It was like a really weird.
Yeah.
So how did you, like, because you're saying like you had the idea for Joy Mode before Klaout. Like, what was, you know, and so you know, Greg was a fun fact when Greg brought the whole subject up about startups is like, I'm thinking, so the reason why we got into the show, at least my understanding of us starting this show, was Greg's like, hey, let's talk about the creator economy. You like talking to people. Great. Let's have you come on board. Okay. I'm like, sure, let's do it. No problem. We'd love to work with Greg, right? We've been friends for a long time. Little did I know that it actually wound up me being a guinea pig for him to test out his company, Zealous. I'm like, okay. So he keeps sending me. So we keep talking every now and then.
Footage from the cameras we have in your house.
This is basically all a product of like, hey, this is what would I do? How far would I go before I realize this? And so he's sending me all these, updates of what he's doing with Zealous, with through Techstars and everything like that. And I'm like, I'm getting a nice peek behind the curtain of how a startup is formed. I'm like, okay, Greg, you had when we started, when I heard about Zealous, it was this one little thing, right? It's all live streaming, and now it's converted to like 20 billion other things. I'm like, what happened in between? Like, what I thought because clearly I've never done my own startup. So like, why didn't it start? Why aren't you still with this? Why are you like, you've pivoted before you technically fully launched into this? Like, what's happening? And so I'm curious, like, in terms of as you started you started Klout first. Why did you start Klout first versus starting Joy Mode? Was it one of those too early situations, or was it just like?
Yeah. So the idea for Joy Mode was like 2005, 2006. There wasn't even iPhones.
Yeah, you need it.
There was no sharing economy. There was, I like spent like a year thinking about the idea and kind of trying to, conceptualize it, and was just like hitting a brick wall. And then the idea for Klout came, and it was like, oh, I can do that today. And then, and while I was on the Klout journey, you saw sharing economy from, Airbnb to Rent the Runway to everything else really explode. So then it was like, oh, now I know how you can do that company. So it was really a timing thing. But, every idea definitely goes through lots and lots and lots of kind of evolutions. And I mean, from days to weeks, like what the company looks like in the morning till the end of the day sometimes is totally different.
Yeah. I did want to chat on one topic because Joe's actually one of the things that, and Joe is a creator, actually doesn't we didn't really talk about it, but Joe's one of I've always found like Joe very good at framing a moment like very succinctly, right? And I think like the very poignant ways of like shaping sort of like something that's happened, right? And recently Joe started a newsletter, actually, right? So he is a creator again, right? In some ways,
yeah.
And I've enjoyed all the writing already so far. I guess like just as we get to the end of our time, all this stuff is happening. And this writing is like this awesome backdrop that seems like completely orthogonal from the literal work, right? But like it's still like the formative work of like everything you do every day, right? I mean, so I am curious now as your journey as like starting a newsletter or like trying to like share your thoughts, like more the motivations and sort of like what are you getting out of it or getting back from it, like in the process of being a creator now?
Yeah, so we sold Joy Mode like right kind of as the pandemic hit.
Let this guy in.
Hello, Kevin.
So we sold Joy Mode right at the beginning just to say hi to Kevin. Kevin was a key member of Klout through like every important thing we accomplished. So the pandemic hit, I'd sold this company, and it was not a sale like Klout was a sale that was like a win, and it was like financially awesome, and just like it was a win. Joy Mode wasn't a win. It was a safe landing and try to return some money back to some folks. And it really hurt. It was like, really like not a fun time. And then, obviously the pandemic and stuff. So like, I then got in this routine where every morning I wake up super early. It would just be the first thing I would do. I'd like try to write from like 5 to 6 a.m. And now and I've stayed on that pretty well, like all this content about like things I've learned and stuff I like thought about, and that I'm now farming from for my Substack. And I actually have a lot written that I can kind of dole out as it seems appropriate. It would be really hard if I was just trying to be a like real creator in the moment while I'm also trying to build this company, because
Mhm.
it is so consuming. But it's nice to have to kind of mind, these things that like I've been through over the last, now 12-ish year or so years as a venture backed CEO, and the ups and downs of that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I found that when I was consulting with other folks, it was like sort of I would finally they were the things that would make like founder shit fall out of my head, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I remember when we did this, or like this is like such a problem that other people shouldn't repeat. It's a good way to provide your own like internal narrative out loud, right? Like as the moments come up, right? Like as you discover things.
Yeah. Yeah. It really has felt like a therapy of like,
Hmm.
it's a like, clearly we've got it good,
Yeah.
but it's intense, and it's like physically and mentally and emotionally hard. And, it's like trying to process that.
Yeah. So by the way, last but since the title of your Substack is Taking Punches, you still boxing?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you still boxing?
Still boxing, yeah. So I grew up in Las Vegas. My father's from Cuba, where boxing is kind of the
Mm.
national sport, and growing up in Las Vegas, which is kind of the mecca of boxing. I just like, did amateur fights as a kid and trained as an adult. Startup is not exactly great for your boxing career because get out of shape pretty fast. But I boxed just this morning, in fact. So
Nice,
uh,
nice.
better at taking punches. It's unfortunately, and it has served me well as a founder.
So what lessons have you learned? Like two lessons you've learned from being a founder, like to leave people with. Like what would those be?
The thing that always comes to mind, because you're going to get a lot of stuff wrong, like no matter what. It's just not getting too high or too low.
Mhm.
Like, you know, Greg was there at the early days of Klout, where like, we would land a big deal and people would be like, "Hey, you don't seem excited," and I'd be like, "Well, because I know tomorrow something's going to go terrible." And we
We
don't
need
get too
more.
high, but then the next day when things got terrible, everyone was like, "Oh, you seem fine," and it's just like, you really have to like keep yourself in a pretty narrow band, because otherwise you'll just burn out.
Okay.
Um, Funny
Cool.
story. Joe and I built a product before Cloud, also in the
What?
middle. Uh,
2006 or seven.
6 or 7, yeah. And actually, it was another well executed, not our pro version, but we actually never got to ship it. But it was Foursquare basically, right? Like, so it was another good idea that actually is still around. Um, in new and interesting ways, reinventing it. Super Local is a new app that's like the new Foursquare, but it's like a tokenized version of it. Um, and yeah, so for that product, by the way, interestingly enough, Joe and I, my favorite story for Joe and I was we ended up watching the last episode of The Sopranos in my hotel room in Delhi. Right? Do you remember that
Yeah, we
ages
went
ago?
to India to work on this product
Yeah, we were in India working on this product.
in the middle of summer in like 2007.
Yeah,
And it was the final episode of The Sopranos. We both really wanted to see it.
we downloaded
We were
it.
using Slingbox to watch it off my TV
Yeah.
in New York.
Oh
Uh,
my, the stuff you had to do back then, like because
yeah,
as opposed to
We wouldn't even think about doing that shit now, right? Like you just wouldn't. You don't need to do it that way. Yeah. Well, but as we sign off here, I will say, Joe, thanks so much for joining us. I think if you weren't listening closely enough, like there's so many important lessons in here for creators, because all creators are founders. End of the day, you may not have realized that part yet, like, or you may not have like sort of wanted to assume that role. But Joe's got great advice. I highly encourage you to sign up for his newsletter because, as I said, he's a great writer, and also just more importantly, like really good at finding sort of the succinct lessons in things as opposed to wasting a lot of time. Maybe that's what happens when your mouth is wired shut. You can't talk a lot. You're like, I'm going to learn how to use all the right words.
yeah. It's so fun. Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
You
no
bet.
worries.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
Joe.
We appreciate you being here as well. And we'll catch up soon. So Ken, I think we're all done for today. Who do we have next? Friday, we obviously have the news, or you have the news. Wait, Yeah, I'm not going to be here.
Oh, wait, are you?
I don't think I might.
Are you really not going to be here, or are you going to be? I can't.
We'll see, but I think I'm not going to be here.
Okay, you're not going to be here. I don't know.
Yeah, but coming up next Wednesday, we do have Marina, who is also a YouTube creator, but also one of the few venture-backed creators, actually. So someone's actually invested in her outcomes as a creator. Slow Ventures, so we'll have her up soon. And then our friend Chris Hewer will be joining us the week after. If you do want to join us, though, to be on the show in the future, we are taking or booking, I think, in almost April now.
I think late March.
Very late March. Yep. There might be one spot left in March, but also definitely in April is where the next slots are available. But please head over to creativeeconomy.com/guest list, and you can find out about how to be a guest. And with that, thank you very much. Grab your AMA, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.
See you.